The first thing Commander Drev noticed was the silence. Not the normal silence of deep space. Every survey pilot knew that silence. This was different. This was the silence of things that had been loud once and were now very, very still. Drev pressed two of his four hands flat against the observation glass and stared out at the dark. Something was wrong with the stars. They were blocked. Not by a planet or a moon or a gas cloud, blocked by shapes. Hundreds of shapes, sitting dead and cold against the black. He could not make them out clearly from this distance, but his gut. Velkrath had guts, small ones, mostly used for processing information at a speed the brain could not. His gut told him to stop the ship. He stopped the ship. Sensor sweep, he said. His voice came out quieter than he intended. Lieutenant Koss ran the sweep. The results came back in 4 seconds. Koss stared at the screen. Then she ran the sweep again. Then she turned in her seat and looked at Drev with the wide, flat expression that meant she had no words. How many? Drev asked. At least 400, Koss said. Probably more. The density increases deeper in. Drev looked back at the shapes in the dark, 400 ships, dead, hanging in the cold space beyond the 9th planet of a small yellow star system that nobody in the Galactic Survey Corps had ever considered worth visiting. The system was unremarkable. The star was unremarkable. The planets were unremarkable. There were 8 or 9 of them, depending on how generous you were with the definition, and none of them had produced a spacefaring civilization. The 3rd planet had some biology on it, simple stuff, vegetation, some animals. The survey rating was a 2 out of 10. Not worth a second look. And yet, 400 dead ships in the dark beyond the outermost ice world. Drev told his crew to hold position. He opened a channel to the core relay and sent a contact report. The relay was 6 days away. 6 days for the signal to arrive. 6 days for a response to come back. He had 12 days to wait and nothing to do with them except look at the shapes. He looked at the shapes. Move us in, he said. Slow, 0.5 kilometer per minute. Koss looked at him. Slow, he said again. The endless patience crept forward. The first wreck they reached was enormous. It was 3 times the length of their ship. It had been a warship once. You could tell by the weapon mounts, the armored plating, the thick forward hull designed to push through defensive fire. Most of the plating was gone now, torn off or melted or just gone, leaving the skeleton of the thing exposed like something that had been eaten and left to dry. Drev had a doctorate in xenoarchaeology. He had spent 40 years cataloging dead civilizations and the things they left behind. He recognized the design language of this ship, the curves of it, the way the forward section tapered, the specific geometry of the weapon ports. He recognized it because this design had been in his textbooks. That's a Kreth warship, he said. Nobody spoke. The Kreth Empire had been one of the great powers of the galaxy 8,000 years ago. They had controlled 11 systems at their height. They had been expansionist, aggressive, brilliant engineers. They had vanished from galactic history so completely that no one had ever found a satisfying explanation. 1 century they were there, the next they were not. Their planets were empty. Their ships were gone. Historians called it the Great Retreat. Some said civil war, some said plague. Some said the Kreth had simply moved on to somewhere else. Here was a Kreth warship, 8,000 years dead, hanging in the dark beyond a small ice world nobody cared about. Keep moving, Drev said. They kept moving. The second wreck was not Kreth. Drev did not recognize it at all. The hull was a smooth organic material, shaped less like a machine and more like a seed pod, vast and pale. The technology suggested something very old, much older than the Kreth ship. The sensor readings were confused by the material, old alloys, old composites, things that did not match any entry in the core materials database. Koss pulled up what she could from the records. She searched for hull materials matching the readings. She searched for hull geometries matching the shape. She found nothing close, not in the database, she said. Take samples, Drev said. Mark the position. They marked it and moved on. 3 hours into the field, Drev stopped counting individual wrecks. There were too many. They were everywhere. Some were enormous, clearly capital ships of immense power. Some were small, escort ships or fighters, clustered in dead formations around the larger ones as if they had been trying to protect something, and had failed. Some wrecks had been blasted into fragments, just spinning clouds of debris that the sensor array had to pick apart to understand. The variety was staggering. 12 different hull materials, 7 different propulsion signatures burned into old exhaust trails that still left faint chemical traces in the vacuum. Weapon types that Drev could identify and weapon types that he could not. Ship designs from cultures that were in the history books and ship designs from cultures that were not, which meant either the database was incomplete or these ships had come from civilizations that were so old no record of them had survived anywhere. He counted 11 distinct species in the first sweep. The second sweep gave him 16. What happened here? Pilot Fenn asked. Fenn was young. This was only his third survey posting. He had never seen anything like this, but then nobody had ever seen anything like this. A battle, Koss said. Not one battle, Drev said. Look at the oxidation states on those older hulls. Look at the decay profiles. These ships did not all die at the same time. He pointed at the pale seed pod shape from before. That wreck is at least 15,000 years old by the surface analysis. That Kreth ship back there died 8,000 years ago. Those three over there. He pointed at a cluster of jagged angular ships that looked like they had been built by someone who had never believed in right angles. Those are no more than 1,000 years old. Maybe less. Silence. Different battles, Fenn said slowly. Different species. Different times. Over 15,000 years, Drev said. He let that sit in the air of the cabin. 15,000 years of ships coming here and dying here. Different civilizations, different eras, different technologies. All of them ending up as wreckage in the cold dark beyond the ice world of a nobody star system. Something had killed them all. Something was still here. They found it 2 hours later. It sat at the center of the graveyard, the way a stone sits the center of a frozen pond. Everything around it was death and drift. It was not dead, and it was not drifting. Drev had thought, approaching, that it would be a planet, a heavily fortified moon, perhaps. Something natural that had been built upon. He had been trying to build a theory around what kind of natural geography could serve as the anchor point for 15,000 years of killing. It was not natural, it was built. The structure was difficult to look at, not because it was ugly, because the scale of it was wrong. His brain kept trying to assign it a size and kept revising upward. It took him 3 separate sensor sweeps before the number settled, and even then it did not feel real. The main structure was 60 kilometers across. The outer defensive platforms, there were dozens of them, extending in a wide perimeter, added another 40 kilometers in every direction. The whole complex was larger than some moons. It was dark, no running lights, no energy emissions, no heat signatures above the ambient temperature of deep space. The sensor array found metal and composite and something else, a material it could not classify, in quantities that were almost beyond measuring, but no power, no activity. It looked dead. It looked like everything else out here. Drev did not believe it was dead for a single second. What is it? Fenn asked. A fortress, Drev said. Because it was. Whatever else it was, whatever civilization had built it, whatever purpose it had served or still served, it was shaped the way only military things are shaped. Thick, layered, built to receive damage and keep standing. The outer plating, even darkened by age and scarred by what must have been thousands of years of battle, still conveyed mass, still conveyed solidity. This was something that had been built by someone who had decided it would not be moved, and had then committed extraordinary resources to making that true. The weapon systems alone. Drev counted the weapon emplacements he could see and stopped at 200, because the number was making him feel a specific kind of small that he did not enjoy. The weapon systems are cold, Koss said, dormant. Whatever power source it uses, there's no energy flowing to the weapons. That's something, Fenn said. Is it? Drev asked. The young pilot thought about that and said nothing. There were marks on the hull. Drev had them magnified. Koss put them on the main screen and they all looked at them for a long time. Not damage marks. Not corrosion. These were deliberate. Cut into the metal, or whatever the outer surface was made of, with precision. A language. A writing system. Geometric and angular, built from straight lines and specific angles that repeated in patterns Drev recognized as the kind of patterns all writing systems made. The visual signature of recorded meaning. He did not recognize the script. He fed it into the linguistic database. The database contained 412 known writing systems from 69 different species cultures, living and extinct. It searched for a match. No match found. Unknown script, Koss read from the screen. Pull the closest visual approximates, Drev said. The database offered 3 possible matches, visual similarities only, no linguistic correspondence. The first was a dead trading script used by a minor species from the outer arm, extinct for about 9,000 years. The second was a ceremonial marking system from a civilization that the historical record named only as the Builders. A species so ancient that nothing was known about them except that they had apparently constructed several megastructures before vanishing. The third was flagged as speculative, a script fragment recovered from a single damaged artifact in a museum collection, origin unknown. Drev looked at the marks on the fortress wall, geometric, angular, precise, cut by something that understood exactly what it was doing. cut by something, some being, some hand, some mind, that had looked at this fortress and decided to write on it. Were they boasting? Were they warning? Were they logging something, the way a traveler cuts marks into a stone to count the days? He did not know. I want a full recording of every mark visible on the outer hull, he said, full detail, every angle. We'll send it with the contact report. He looked at the fortress. He thought about the ships behind him. Hundreds of ships, 16 species minimum, 15,000 years of dead. All of them had come here. None of them had gone home. Something about that fact organized itself in Drev's mind with a clarity he did not want. He was a scientist. He believed in data and analysis and the slow work of understanding. But he was also Velkrath, which meant he had a gut, and his gut was speaking to him in very plain language right now. He was looking at something that had fought the Kreth Empire and won. The Kreth Empire had conquered 8-star systems. The Kreth Empire had weapons platforms that could crack a moon. The Kreth Empire had been the most powerful civilization in the galaxy for 2,000 years before they disappeared. And every historian who had ever studied them agreed that they had not disappeared because someone had beaten them. Except here, whatever this fortress was, whatever had built it, something had beaten them here. And it had beaten everyone else who came after. 16 species, possibly more, across 15,000 years. Drev thought about the third planet, the one with the simple biology, the vegetation and the animals. The survey rating of 2 out of 10. He thought about the alignment. The fortress sat at a specific position relative to the star system, not random, not accidental. If you drew a line from the fortress to the system's center, the third planet was on that line. He thought about that for a long time. His contact report was going to be the most important document any Survey Corps officer had ever sent. He began writing it in his head. He started with, "We have found something, and I do not have adequate words for what it is, but I will try." He thought about the third planet again, the simple life on it, the unimpressive little world hanging in the middle of the habitable zone of an unremarkable yellow star. He thought about what kind of civilization builds a 60-kilometer fortress and stations it at the edge of their star system and leaves it there to kill everyone who comes. He thought about what kind of civilization builds something that is still standing 15,000 years later. He looked at the cold, dark bulk of the fortress. It looked back at nothing. It had no lights. It had no heat. It had no emissions. It was patient. It had been patient for a very long time. Drev pulled his hands away from the observation glass and walked back to his console and sat down. His whole body felt like it needed to be very careful about where it was and what it was doing. Like the universe had just gotten larger in a way that changed the rules. "We hold position," he said. "We observe. We do not approach further." Nobody argued. The endless patience sat in the dark and waited for a reply that was 12 days away. The fortress sat in the dark and waited for something that might have been much longer. The contact report reached the Survey Corps relay station at 0340 Standard Time, which meant the duty officer who received it was tired and under-caffeinated and had been watching a recorded drama for the last 3 hours. Her name was Coordinator Fess. She was Orvani, which meant she had 4 eyes and no patience for things that disrupted quiet night shifts. She opened the report because it was flagged urgent. She read the first paragraph. She put down her drink. She read the first paragraph again. Then she opened the priority channel to the Corps director and called him at home and told him he needed to read something. And no, it could not wait until morning. The director read it. He called the High Survey Council. The High Survey Council called the Galactic Assembly Liaison. The Galactic Assembly Liaison was at a dinner party and stepped outside to take the call and never went back inside by the time Commander Drev received his reply. 12 days later, the contact report had already passed through 47 different offices across 9 species governments. It had generated 112 internal memos, 2 emergency council sessions, and a classified military assessment that 7 different admirals had signed off on with hands that were not entirely steady. The reply to Drev was short. It said, "Hold position, do not approach, do not attempt communication. Reinforcements en route, estimated arrival 40 days. At the bottom, added by someone whose name was redacted, were 4 words. "You did right, Commander." Drev read it twice. He folded it. He went back to the observation window and looked at the fortress. 40 days. He had been looking at it for 12 already. It had not moved. It had not powered up. It had not done anything except sit there being enormous and cold and covered in script that nobody could read. Every day Koss ran a full sensor sweep and every day the results were the same, dormant, cold, patient. He was starting to feel like the fortress was aware of them, in the way a very large and very confident thing is aware of something very small. Not threatened, not curious, just aware. He did not share this thought with his crew. The reinforcements were not just Survey Corps ships. Drev had expected maybe 3 or 4 vessels, a senior archaeologist, some specialist equipment, maybe a small military escort, because the Corps had protocols about sites that might contain active weapon systems. What arrived on day 41 was a fleet, 40 ships. 20 of them were Velcrath Navy, 8 were Orvani Science Directorate vessels. 4 flew the banner of the Tharn Collective, who had not cooperated with anyone on anything in 60 years, but had apparently made an exception. The rest were a mix. Sendul, 2 species Drev had only ever read about in diplomatic briefings, all of them stopping their ships at the edge of the graveyard, all of them going quiet as the sensor sweeps came back. The fleet commander was Admiral Sorev. She was old, even by Velcrath standards, and she had the kind of face that had spent decades making fast decisions and was very good at not showing what those decisions cost. She came aboard the Endless Patience because it was the only ship that had been here long enough to know anything, and she sat across from Drev and read his full report, expanded one, the one he had spent 40 days writing and refining, without saying a word. When she finished, she looked up at him. "How many distinct species in the wreckage?" she asked. 22 confirmed, he said. "We believe there are more that we have not identified. The oldest debris may belong to civilizations with no surviving record." She nodded slowly. "The Kreth. Yes, we always believed the Kreth simply left," she said. "That they found something more interesting and moved on." "Some of them did," Drev said, "or tried to. The ships in the graveyard represent only a portion of their military capacity at the time of their disappearance. They sent a war fleet here, Admiral, not their whole civilization. Whatever happened to the rest of the Kreth, some of them came to this star system with warships and did not return." Sorov looked at the report. She looked at the image of the fortress on the screen beside her. "And it is still cold," she said. "Still cold," he said. "The xenolinguists arrived on day 43. There were 6 of them, 3 species, and they set up their equipment in the largest cargo bay of the fleet's science vessel and began working on the script from the fortress hull. They had Drev's recordings, which were detailed. They had every known writing system in every database any of the assembled species governments maintained. They cross-referenced, compared, pattern-mapped, and argued with each other in 3 different languages. On day 47, their lead researcher, a very thin Orvani named Dr. Was, came to Admiral Sorov with a preliminary finding. The script was not in any database, but there were fragments, not of this script, but of something related to it, in the recovered archives of the Kreth. The Kreth had kept records, and those records had survived in partial form in 3 different galactic museums. In those records, the Kreth made references to a species they had encountered at the edge of what they called the Empty Quarter, the region of space they believed to be uninhabited and of no strategic value. The Kreth had a name for this species. It translated roughly, with all the uncertainty that came from translating a dead language, as something between the stubborn ones and those who will not fall. The Kreth records indicated this species had been contacted twice. The first contact had been an attempt at negotiation. The Kreth wanted access to the empty star system for resource extraction. The response had been what the Kreth described as a refusal, delivered without appropriate deference. The second contact was the war fleet. The Kreth records stopped there. That particular archive had no further entries. The Velcrath and Orvani and Tharn historians on the fleet found similar threads when they searched their own deep archives. The Tharn had a 7,000-year-old oral tradition about a star system at the edge of explored space where something terrible waited. Their ancestors had called it the sealed door, and the telling of it included a warning. "Do not knock, for what is inside does not sleep. It only rests." The Orvani archives had a brief reference in a diplomatic record from 6,000 years ago. A species called the Veth had apparently sent a trade delegation past the edge of known space, and the delegation had not returned. A second expedition sent to find the first had sent back a single transmission. "There is a wall here, and the wall has weapons, and we are turning around." The Veth had survived because they turned around. They were still alive, a small spacefaring civilization somewhere in the mid-arm. The dual archives found a war memorial, 3,000 years old. It honored a fleet of 200 ships that had been sent to secure a region of space beyond the outer system of a yellow star. It listed names, 700 crew names. None of them had come home. The memorial called the star system the Dead Mouth and instructed all dual pilots for all time to treat the region as a forbidden zone. Species after species finding their thread in the tapestry, all of them leading here, all of them ending here. On day 52, one of the Tharn science vessels sent a probe into the graveyard. This was approved, controlled. Standard procedure for a site assessment. The probe moved slowly, broadcasting a non-threatening signal, performing detailed scans of the debris. It had been operating for 6 hours without incident when its pilot moved it onto a trajectory that brought it within 2 kilometers of the outer defensive platforms of the fortress. This was not approved. The pilot, young, curious, overeager, had made a decision without telling anyone. The fortress woke up, not fully. Not the way Drev had been quietly terrified it might. No power surge, no weapons charging, no targeting systems blazing to life across every frequency. What happened was smaller than that and somehow more frightening for being smaller. A single light came on. One light, on the outermost platform, the one closest to the probe. A pale blue light, steady, not blinking. The sensors screamed. The energy reading from that one light was larger than the entire output of the fleet. Whatever the fortress was using to generate power, it was not running low after 15,000 years. The probe pilot yanked it back. The light stayed on for 11 seconds, then it went off. The fortress went cold again. Nobody spoke on any of the fleet channels for almost 2 minutes. Sorev's voice came through finally, very calm, with only the faintest edge underneath it that told Drev she was holding something tightly in check. All vessels, she said, maintain current positions. No further probes within 10 kilometers of the structure. And someone please relieve that pilot of their station before I do it in a way that affects their career permanently. They were discussing what the light meant. Debate, argument, theory, all of it going in circles when Koss found the signal. She almost missed it. It was buried in the background noise of the fortress's passive emissions, which were faint but present, the low hum of something very large and very old just existing. She had been filtering that noise out for weeks. On day 54, she ran a different filter. One of the xenolinguists had suggested it, and underneath the ambient hum she found something structured. Not random, not the white noise of dormant machinery, a signal, repeating, cycling through a specific frequency pattern that repeated every 73 minutes. It was being broadcast in a very specific direction. She calculated the bearing. She extended the line outward from the fortress, through the star system, through the planets, through the inner system where the gas giants sat, past the rocky middle worlds, all the way to the third planet, the one with the vegetation and the animals, the one rated 2 out of 10. The signal had been broadcasting at the third planet. Koss stared at her screen for a long time before she called Drev over. Drev stared at the screen for a long time before he called Admiral Sorev. Sorev stared at the screen. Her expression did not change. She had the discipline of someone who had received bad news many times and had learned to let her face be a wall. How long has it been broadcasting, she asked. Unknown, Koss said. We only detected it today. It could have started after the probe incident. It could have been transmitting for 15,000 years. The signal strength is too low for us to distinguish new from continuous. What does it say? Sorev asked. We don't know yet, Koss said. The linguists are working on it, but the modulation pattern is consistent with the script on the hull. Same geometric signature, same angular structure. Sor looked at the star system on the navigation display. She found the third planet. She found its orbit, its size, its basic composition. Pull the original survey file on that planet, she said. Drev already had it open. He turned his screen toward the Admiral. Class M world, nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, liquid water, land masses and oceans. The biology assessment was brief. Multicellular organisms, several thousand species of varying complexity, most notable being a group of upright bipedal mammals concentrated on the larger land masses. Early tool use observed, fire use observed. Some evidence of rudimentary social organization. Survey rating, 2 out of 10. Sorev read it. She read it again. Bipedal mammals, she said. Yes, Drev said. The fortress had been sending signals at a planet full of bipedal mammals for nobody knew how long. Sorev stood very still. Drev thought about what he had not said out loud since day one. What he had been not saying carefully, and with effort for 54 days. The thing that kept sitting in his mind. Every time he looked at the fortress and thought about what kind of civilization builds something that does not lose. He thought about the script on the hull, geometric, angular, not in any database. He thought about the bipedal mammals on the third planet, early tools, fire, social organization. He thought about 15,000 years, about what 15,000 years could do to a species if it started in the right place, about how far a civilization could travel from early tool use to 60-kilometer fortress, with weapons that can wake up and deliver a single warning shot that reads as casual. He thought about how long the signal had been transmitting, and he thought about the fact that, in all his years of xenoarchaeology, In all the sites he had visited and all the civilizations he had catalogued, he had never once encountered a fortress that transmitted signals to a planet full of beings who had nothing to do with it, unless they had everything to do with it, unless they were the reason it was built, unless the fortress was not transmitting to something that was not there yet, unless it was transmitting to something that was still becoming what it was going to be. He looked at the cold bulk of the fortress. He thought about patience. He thought about what an architect builds when they believe with enough certainty in the future to construct something designed to wait for it. He thought about what you would have to believe about your own children's children's children, stretched out across 15,000 years, to leave them a fortress. Admiral Sorev said very quietly. I think we need to talk about the third planet. Drev said nothing. The fortress said nothing. It had been saying nothing for 15,000 years, and it had been absolutely right to do so. The Galactic Assembly met in emergency session on the 61st day. The chamber held representatives from 31 species governments. It was a large room built for large disagreements, and it had seen both in its 400-year history. But the people sitting in it now had a specific kind of quiet about them that the chamber had not seen before. Not the quiet of disagreement. The quiet of people who are trying to decide something that frightens them and are pretending, for the sake of their own dignity, that they are not frightened. The session lasted 9 hours. The debate was long, and the debate was circular, and it kept coming back to the same two positions, the way all genuinely hard arguments do, because both positions were reasonable, and neither was fully right. The first position was this. The fortress was dormant. It had been dormant for an unknown but very long time. It had delivered one warning signal when provoked, and when the provocation stopped, it had gone dormant again. This was consistent with a defensive system, not an aggressive one. A defensive system that had been built to protect something, and was still, after 15,000 years, protecting it. The correct response was caution, study, and patience. If the signal to the third planet was relevant, the correct response was to understand why before acting. The representative making this argument was Velkrath. Specifically, it was Admiral Sorev, who had been recalled to make her report in person, and who stood at the floor of the chamber with the kind of posture that said she had slept badly for 61 days, and was not particularly interested in being disagreed with. The second position was this. The fortress was a weapon of unknown capability, unknown origin, and unknown intent, sitting in the middle of a killing field that documented 15,000 years of offensive military action against anyone who came near it. The single warning shot had been delivered with energy output that exceeded the entire assembled fleet. The fleet, 40 ships, 9 governments, and the fortress had matched that with one light that lasted 11 seconds. What happened when it used all of its weapons? What happened when it decided the Assembly's fleet was no longer welcome in the graveyard? Every civilization that had ever come here was dead or had retreated, and never come back. The correct response was to destroy it, for it destroyed them. The representative making this argument was Tharn. His name was High Counselor Vreth, and he was very old, and he had the specific intensity of someone who had spent his career being right about things others ignored. The oral tradition of my people, Vreth said, says do not knock, for what is inside does not sleep, it only rests. We are knocking. We have been knocking for 61 days. We have 40 ships sitting in the killing field. The only question that matters is whether we have the capability to destroy it before it wakes up fully and adds our fleet to its collection. Sorev looked at him from across the chamber floor. And if we cannot destroy it, if we try and fail, what have we accomplished besides confirming to whatever controls the fortress that we are enemies? Then we confirm what it already believes, Vreth said. Everything that came here was an enemy. That is the record of this site. We did not write that record. We only found it. The chamber argued for 9 hours. The vote at the end was not a clean one. 17 governments voted to send a military strike force and attempt to destroy the fortress. 11 voted for continued observation and study. 3 abstained, which in Galactic Assembly terms meant they thought both options were bad and wanted to be on record as having said so. 17 was enough. The strike force would be assembled. 60 ships, including 6 capital-class vessels from the Tharn military, which was the most powerful single fleet any government was willing to commit. Estimated assembly time, 90 days. Estimated transit time to the site, 30 days, 120 days. Sorev sent a message to Drev. It said, hold position. Do not, under any circumstances, allow any vessel to approach the fortress. We have 120 days, and I intend to use every one of them. Drev read the message. He looked at the fortress. He thought the fortress was not going to care about their timeline. He thought that but did not say it. On day 70, the xenolinguists broke the signal. Not fully, partially, enough. Dr. Was had been working on the transmission from the fortress for 16 days with 4 other linguists and an AI system built specifically for cryptographic language analysis. The signal was not a simple transmission. It was layered. The outermost layer was a mathematical sequence. Primes, geometric progressions, the kind of pattern that any sufficiently developed intelligence would recognize as deliberate. Below that was a phonetic key, structured like a dictionary, pairing sounds to symbols from the hull script. Below that was the message itself. The mathematical layer was designed to be solvable. It was an invitation to keep digging, a way of saying, if you are smart enough to find this, you are smart enough to go further. The phonetic key had taken most of the 16 days. The message itself, once they had the key, took 4 hours. Was brought the translation to Drev and Sorev together. He set it on the table between them. Neither of them picked it up immediately. Then Sorev reached out and took it. The translation was not long. The original message, in the script on the hull and in the signal both, was brief by the standards of any civilization's important documents. It said, "This place belongs to those who made it. We are gone, but we are not gone. We have left what we were so that what comes after us will know where to stand. The system is ours. The wall stands. If you are reading this and you are not ours, understand what the graveyard means. It means we do not move. It means we have never moved. It means we will not move. If you are reading this and you are ours, we are sorry we were not here. Stand where we stood. The wall knows you." Sorev read it twice. She put it down. "The wall knows you," she said. "Yes," Was said that phrase. "The wall knows you. That is a recognition system. That is what we believe." Sorev looked at Drev. Drev looked back at her. The thing neither of them had said out loud for 70 days sat between them now with the translation as evidence. "The survey data on the 3rd planet," Sorev said. "How old is it?" Drev had already checked. He had checked it on day 54 when Kos found the signal, and he had checked it again on day 60 and again 3 days ago, when the linguistic team started making progress. "The original survey was conducted 212 years ago," he said. "Standard flyby, no detailed assessment. The bipedal mammal notation was made by the survey drone's automated biological scanner. There has been no follow-up survey. 212 years. In 212 years, a species with early tools and fire and rudimentary social organization could do a great deal. Or nothing at all. Most species with early tools and fire and rudimentary social organization did nothing at all for a very long time. Tens of thousands of years of very slow progress, but some did not, some moved fast. "We need a current assessment of the 3rd planet," Sorev said. "We sent a scout drone yesterday," Drev said. "It will reach the inner system in 11 days. Sorev nodded. She picked up the translation again. She read it a 3rd time. "The wall knows you. A recognition system built into a 15,000-year-old fortress. Waiting. For what? For whom?" The scout drone reached the inner system on day 81. Its automated systems began a standard biological survey of the 3rd planet. It swept the atmosphere, analyzed the surface, categorized the land masses and water bodies, and the distribution of life forms across both. The report it sent back was not what anyone expected. The 3rd planet was not primitive. There were cities. Thousands of them, on every landmass, connected by networks of infrastructure visible from orbit. There was industry. There were satellites, dozens of them in low orbit, higher orbit, several at Lagrange points. There were what appeared to be large installations on the planet's single large moon. There was debris in the outer system suggesting regular travel beyond the inner planets. There were, at the very edge of the scout drone's sensor range, what appeared to be the engine signatures of spacecraft. The bipedal mammals had not spent the last 212 years sitting around fires. They had cities. They had satellites. They had spacecraft. They were spacefaring. Was read the drone report and sat very still. "They are not a primitive species," she said. "They were," Drev said. 200 years ago they were. 200 years, Was said. She understood what that meant. Every linguist understood history. 200 years was nothing. 200 years was the blink of an eye in civilizational time. For a species to go from early fire use to orbital satellites in 200 years was not impossible, but it was unusual. Very unusual. The standard developmental curve for a spacefaring species, once they achieved reliable combustion technology, was 600 to 1,000 years to first orbit. These ones had done it in less than 200. She thought about the signal. Broadcasting at that planet. Broadcasting for an unknown number of years. She thought about what the message said. "If you are reading this and you are ours." She thought about a recognition system waiting in a dormant fortress. She thought about a civilization that built something 15,000 years ago, left a message in it, aimed a signal at a small world where something was being born, and waited. Patient. Impossibly patient. They are going to come here, Was said. Not yet, Drev said. The drone assessment suggests early spacefaring capability. Interplanetary, possibly. Not interstellar. Not yet, Was agreed. She looked at the drone report, at the cities and the satellites and the moon installations. They are moving fast, she said. The signal reached the human monitoring station on the edge of the solar system on what humans called a Tuesday. The station was called Sentinel-4. It sat in a stable orbit far beyond the last planet, one of 7 automated listening posts humanity had placed at the edges of the solar system 15 years ago as part of the Deep Space Early Warning Network. The network had been built to detect incoming signals, debris, and anything else moving toward the inner system from the dark. It had spent 15 years detecting mostly nothing, which was what everyone expected and hoped for. Sentinel-4's antenna array caught the signal on a routine sweep. The onboard AI flagged it, not as a threat. The signal was not moving. It was not a projectile or an object on an intercept course. It was a broadcast, a transmission, structured and repeating, originating from a point well beyond the outermost planet, in a region of space that the Deep Space Network had scanned many times and always found empty. The AI ran its standard signal analysis. The transmission did not match any known human encoding system. It was not random. The mathematical structure of the outermost layer was identifiable, sequences, geometric progressions, and the AI flagged it as a possible artificial signal of unknown origin and forwarded it to Earth with a priority tag. At the Deep Space Signal Analysis Center in Bangalore, a junior researcher named Priya Shen was the first human being to look at it. She looked at it for a long time. She pulled up the direction of origin. She mapped it against the outer system. She found the transmission point and looked at it on the nav chart, and then pulled up a long-range telescope array and pointed it at the same coordinates. The telescope found wreckage, hundreds of pieces of wreckage, and something else, sitting at the center of the wreckage, large enough to register as a solid mass on the optical array. Dark still, no emissions visible. Priya Shen stared at her screen. She was 26 years old, and she had wanted this job since she was 9. She had imagined, more times than she could count, what it would feel like if the arrays ever picked up something real. She had not imagined it would feel like this. Like the dark outside the window had always had something in it. Like something had always been there, waiting for her to look up. She reached for her supervisor's extension. Her hand was very steady. She was surprised by that. She was surprised, and then she thought about it for just a moment, and she was not surprised at all. The argument about whether to send a ship took 11 days, not because humanity was slow, because humanity was thorough, and because the signal analysis team had found the mathematical layers in the transmission and started pulling them apart, and because every layer they pulled revealed something new, and because everyone with a doctorate and an opinion wanted to be in the room when the next layer came apart. By day 4, they had the phonetic key. By day 7, they had a working translation of the outermost message. By day 8, the argument stopped being about whether to send a ship and started being about which ship and who would be on it. The translation had done that. Specifically the last 4 words of it. The wall knows you. That phrase had gone through the xenolinguistics team, then the signal analysis team, then 3 different government science committees, and finally the United Earth Space Agency director, who read it at 7 in the morning with a cup of coffee and sat quietly for a long time, before calling her deputy and saying, "We are going to need a ship." The ship they sent was called the Ganges. It was not a warship. Humanity had warships. Small ones, built in the last 40 years as the solar system got busier, and the outer colonies required protection from the occasional disagreement about mining rights. The Ganges was not one of those. It was a deep space research and survey vessel, the best one Earth had. Fast, well-equipped, built to go far and stay out for a long time. The crew was 8 people. Commander Yara Osi was in charge. She was 43, Nigerian-Canadian, and had spent most of her career surveying the moons of the gas giants. She was the kind of person who read a situation quickly and spoke only after she had something worth saying. Her crew respected her, which in the close quarters of a deep space ship was the only currency that mattered. The science lead was Dr. Marcus Webb. He was British, 51, and had built his career on xenolinguistics, despite the fact that until 3 weeks ago there had been no confirmed xenolinguistic material to work with. He had spent decades preparing for a moment everyone told him would never come. And he had the specific energy of a man who had been right about something for a very long time, and was now being given the evidence to prove it. He slept 4 hours a night and talked constantly. The rest of the crew were engineers, pilots, a medical officer, and a system specialist named Hannah Cho, who had the quiet competence of someone who had fixed every possible thing that could go wrong on a spacecraft and was ready for the things she had not thought of yet. They left Earth orbit on a Thursday. It took them 19 days to reach the outer system. Nobody had told them about the alien fleet. This was not an oversight. It was a calculation made by several committees who believed, probably correctly, that in forming a crew of 8 civilians, that they were flying toward a site currently occupied by 40 warships from 9 extraterrestrial governments might affect their willingness to go. The mission brief described the signal, the transmission coordinates, and the mathematical structure of the message. It described the size of the object at the coordinates. It did not describe the graveyard. It did not describe the assembly of alien vessels holding position at the edge of it. OC found out when the Ganges was 4 days out, and Hannes Cho picked up active sensor pings from the direction they were heading. "Those are targeting sweeps," Cho said, which was not a phrase any of them had expected to hear on a science mission. OC looked at the data. She looked at it for a long time. She identified the sweep patterns. She estimated the number of sources. She did the math. 40 ships, she said. Roughly, Cho said. OC opened a channel to Earth and filed a very short and very pointed report. She described the targeting sweeps and the estimated fleet size, and she said precisely, "An explanation would be appreciated. We are continuing on course." The response from Earth took 8 hours to arrive. It was longer than her report and contained considerably more information than her mission brief had. She read it at the table, and the crew mess with Webb, looking over her shoulder, because he could not help himself, and the rest of the crew sitting around the table because word travels fast, on a small ship. When she finished, she put the screen face down on the table. Webb read the full report. He made a sound that was not quite a word. 15,000 years, he said. Yes, OC said. And nobody in the history books. No, he sat back. He looked at the ceiling. 15,000 years ago, our ancestors were just about inventing agriculture. Some of them, OC said. The ones we know about. Webb looked at her. She looked back at him. Keep moving, she said. The graveyard was worse than the report described. Reading about hundreds of derelict ships was one thing. Passing through them was another. The Ganges moved slowly, OC holding them to a crawl, and for 3 hours the crew sat at the observation ports and said almost nothing. The scale of it was wrong in a way that was hard to process. Not just the number of wrecks, the variety of them. Shapes that made no sense by human engineering standards. Materials that caught the light in wrong ways. Weapon systems on dead hulls that were still recognizable as weapon systems, even though they were nothing like any weapon humanity had ever built. All of it dead and cold and spinning very slowly in the dark. Cho found the Kreth warship, the one Drev had identified on day 1, 8,000 years of drift, moving it only slightly from where it had died. She put it on the main screen, and nobody said anything about it for almost a minute. "Something killed that," the pilot, Sergeant Ajay Nair, said finally. "Something killed all of it," Webb said. "Something that's still here," Nair said. "Yes," Nair nodded. He turned back to his controls. He kept them moving. OC noticed that he did not slow down. She noticed that none of her crew, despite everything, suggested they should turn around. She filed that away and did not comment on it. The alien fleet picked them up when they were 2 hours from the fortress. The contact was immediate. Tight beam transmission, aimed precisely at the Ganges, which told OC the fleet had been tracking them since they entered the graveyard. She accepted the signal. The translation software Earth had loaded into the Ganges before departure, compiled from the linguistic work on the fortress signal, processed it in near real time. The message was from something called the Galactic Assembly Observation Fleet. It identified itself. It ordered the Ganges to stop and hold position. It said the region was under assembly jurisdiction pending a security determination, and unauthorized vessels were not permitted to proceed. OC read it. She keyed her response. "This is Commander Yara OC of the United Earth Research Vessel Ganges. The transmission we are investigating originated from coordinates within our home solar system. We are proceeding to investigate a signal originating in our own solar system. We will do so peacefully and without hostile intent. We appreciate the Assembly's concern for our safety." She closed the channel. "They're going to try to stop us," Nair said. "Let them try," Cho said mildly, which surprised everyone a little because Cho was usually the quiet one. The alien fleet did not try. They hailed twice more and then went silent. OC imagined the conversations happening on those ships. because she imagined a great deal of argument and very little agreement. She thought that whoever was in command over there was either very wise or very uncertain, because a wise commander and an uncertain one would make the same call here. Wait and see. The Ganges kept moving. The fortress filled the observation port. Up close, it was a different thing than a sensor reading or a drone image could convey. It had a presence, not in any mystical sense, in the physical sense of something so large and so solid that the space around it felt different. The way a mountain changes the feeling of a valley, not by doing anything, but simply by being there. Osi held them at 5 kilometers. She looked at the weapon emplacements. She counted the defensive platforms. She read the script on the hull, in the telescope feed. The same geometric angular marks that Webb's colleagues on Earth had been working on from the drone data. Up close, she could see how deep the cuts were, how precise, not the work of automation, the work of something with hands and intention. It's dark, Nair said. No power signature. The alien fleet said it woke up when they got too close, OC said. We're close, Nair said. We are, she said. She opened a channel on the frequency the transmission had been using. She did not know what to say. She thought about what the message had said. She thought about the last 4 words. She said, "This is the Ganges out of Earth. We received your message." The silence after that lasted 11 seconds. Then the fortress lit up, not a single warning light, all of it. Every platform, every emplacement, every surface, flooding with a steady blue-white light that made the surrounding dark look even darker by contrast. The sensor board screamed. Webb grabbed his console. Nair's hands were on the controls. "Weapons?" Osi asked, her voice level. "No," Cho said, reading fast. "No weapons charging. Power is up across the whole structure, but it's not combat configuration. It's more like..." She stopped. She looked at her screen. "It's like it just woke up. Full systems. Running diagnostics. It's running diagnostics. Like a ship that just came out of standby." "How long was it in standby?" Webb asked. Nobody answered because nobody knew, but everybody thought about it. A door opened in the hull. Not a weapon port. Not a defensive system cycling up a door. A large one, clearly designed for a ship to dock with, set into the main structure in a position protected on 3 sides by the fortress's own bulk. The Ganges sat there for a moment. "It opened a door for us," Nair said. "Yes," Osi said. "We're going in," Nair said. "Not a question. We're going in," she confirmed. The docking bay inside was large enough to hold 20 times the size of the Ganges. The air was breathable. That was the first thing the sensors confirmed, and it was the thing that made Webb sit down heavily in his seat, because it meant whoever built this had known who was coming. You did not fill a bay with a nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere by accident. You did it because you knew what was going to dock there. The gravity was standard Earth gravity. The temperature was 21 degrees Celsius. The lights that came on when they stepped off the ship were tuned to a wavelength that human eyes found comfortable and clear. "They built this for us," Webb said. "They built this for someone like us," Osi said. "No," Webb said quietly. "Look at the door height. Look at the proportions of this space. Look at where the lights are positioned." He turned slowly, taking it all in. "They built this for bipedal beings of approximately human height, with eyes approximately where our eyes are." Nobody argued with him. They went deeper. The records room was at the heart of the fortress. It was not locked. The door opened as they approached. Inside, the walls were covered floor to ceiling in the angular script, but there were also images. Not photographs, not screens, something between the two. Surfaces that held images the way paper holds ink, fixed and permanent. The images showed people, human people, or close enough to human that the difference, if there was a difference, was invisible to Osi's eyes. Bipedal. 2 arms, 2 legs, faces with 2 eyes and a nose and a mouth, dressed in clothing she did not recognize. Standing in front of ships she did not recognize. Standing in front of what was very clearly this fortress, still under construction in some of the images, complete and lit in others. Webb was pulling out his translation tools before Osi said a word. He worked for 2 hours while the rest of the crew moved carefully through the room, documenting everything, touching nothing. At the end of 2 hours he called Ose over and showed her his screen. He had translated enough. The story was not complete. It would take months to translate fully. But the outline of it was there, cut into these walls 15,000 years ago, by people who had known they were leaving and had wanted what came after them to understand why. 15,000 years ago there had been a human civilization, not primitive, not early, advanced, spacefaring, spread across several worlds in this star system and into the nearest neighboring systems. Not an empire in the grand sense. The records describe something more like a network, many communities, many voices, held together by shared technology and shared history rather than by conquest. They had not been alone. The galaxy then as now was full of other civilizations. Most of those civilizations had looked at the small network of human worlds and seen something to be taken. Resources, space, labor something. The wars had been long. The records described them without self-pity and without dramatics. The way people who have been through terrible things sometimes describe them, plainly, because the weight of the event does not need decoration. The human civilization had nearly been destroyed. 3 separate times, enemies had come within reach of the home world. 3 separate times, something had stopped them. After the 3rd time, the survivors had made a decision. They built the fortress. They called it, in their own script, something that Webb translated first as the last argument, and then revised to the word that ends the conversation. They built it over decades. They put everything they had learned about war and defense and endurance into it. They designed it to run without them, to maintain itself, to protect the system from anything that came, forever, or as close to forever as engineering could reach. They built into it a recognition system, DNA-keyed, biological signature keyed, that would identify the descendants of the builders and open for them alone. Then they left. Not all of them. Some stayed on the home world, starting over, going back to simpler things, waiting to grow again into whatever came next. But most of them left, went deeper into space, beyond the reach of the enemies who had broken them, looking for somewhere safe, looking for somewhere new. The records did not say where they went. The last entry in the records room simply said, "We will not be back, but you will be here. You were always going to be here. We left you the wall will hold. It has always held." O.C. read it on Webb's screen. She read it a second time. She looked at the images on the walls, at the faces of people who were 15,000 years dead, and looked enough like her that she could have passed them on a street. Her ancestors had nearly been wiped out of the galaxy before agriculture, before cities, before writing, by the history humanity knew. Some part of her civilization, some part that had never made it into any history book, that had risen and fought and broken and made the hardest decision available, had left, and left the wall standing. And the wall had held, every single time. She thought about the graveyard outside, about the Kreth Empire and the Tharn stories and the Dual Memorial and 16 other species, and 15,000 years of trying. She thought about what the fortress had said to all of them, without ever saying a word. She thought about the strike fleet that was now. She checked her count, 71 days away. She straightened up. "Webb," she said. "How long to translate the technical documentation, the weapons systems, the defense architecture, how it works?" Webb looked at her. "You think we should learn how to use it," he said. "I think," O.C. said, "that it belongs to us." She said it simply, without drama. The way a person states something that is just true. Webb was quiet for a moment. 6 weeks, he said. "Maybe less." "Start now," she said. The first thing O.C. did after reading the records was sleep for 6 hours. Webb thought this was strange. He had not slept properly in 3 days and had no plans to start. The records room had more walls and every wall had more script, and he was not going to stop until he had read all of it, or his body gave out, whichever came first. O.C. slept because she had learned, over 20 years of long missions in hostile environments, that decisions made on an empty and exhausted mind were the kind of decisions you spent the rest of your career explaining. She had a strike fleet coming and 71 days to be ready for it, and she needed to be sharp for all 71 of them. She woke up, ate, and went to find Cho. "Tell me what you know," she said. Cho had spent the 6 hours O.C. slept doing what Cho did, which was walking around a system until she understood it. The fortress was enormous, but its logic, once you started following it, was clean. Military engineering had a clarity to it that civilian engineering sometimes lacked. Everything had a purpose. Everything connected to something else. There was no waste, no decoration, no feature that did not serve a function. "The power source is in the deep core," she said, walking O.C. through the schematics she had compiled. "I don't fully understand what it is yet. Something that should not still be running after 15,000 years, but here we are. The weapon systems are distributed, not centralized. There's no single point you could hit to take them offline. You would have to disable each emplacement individually, and there are." She paused. "How many?" O.C. asked. "On this main structure, 240 confirmed active emplacements. On the outer platforms, another 180. Cho stopped walking. She turned to look at O.C. "That is not the part that matters." "Tell me the part that matters," O.C. said. Cho pulled up a map on her screen. The map showed the graveyard, the full debris field, rendered in sensor data, color-coded by mass and material. "I ran a detailed scan of the debris field," Cho said, looking at every object. Every piece of wreckage, every fragment, every dead ship. She tapped the screen. Sections of the debris field changed color. These are not wrecks. Osi looked at the map. Roughly a third of what the alien fleet had catalogued as debris was highlighted. Distributed throughout the field, not clustered. Spread evenly, almost geometrically, across the entire volume of the graveyard in a pattern that was not random at all once you looked at it from directly above. Weapons platforms, Osei said. Disguised as wreckage, Cho said. Covered in debris. Coated in materials that read as dead metal on a standard scan. They have been sitting in that field for, I don't know how long. The oldest ones by material analysis are at least 10,000 years old. They have been dormant, cold, completely invisible to anything that wasn't looking for them specifically. Osi studied the map. The fortress was not just the fortress. The entire graveyard was the fortress. Any fleet that came in force would move through the debris field to reach the main structure. Any fleet moving through the debris field would move between and around and past several hundred disguised weapons platforms before it got close enough to see the main structure clearly. They would already be inside the kill zone. They would have been inside it from the moment they entered the graveyard. Every fleet that had ever come here had done the same thing, moved through what looked like the evidence of previous failures, not understanding that the evidence of previous failures was also the weapon that would make them fail. 15,000 years of the same trap, 15,000 years of it working. Osi stood there for a moment with that thought. Do the platforms respond to the fortress systems? She asked. Yes, Cho said. Full integration. They all came online when the fortress woke up for us. They are currently in standby, same as the main emplacements. Waiting. Can we control them from inside the fortress? Cho looked at her steadily. Yes. Osi nodded. She went to find Webb. On day 31, Osi opened a communication channel to the alien fleet. The response came from Admiral Sorev, which told Osi that the Velkrath were still the most rational voice in the fleet, and that Sorev had made sure she was the one handling contact. The translation software managed the exchange in near real time, rough at the edges but functional. Osi introduced herself. She told Sorev what they had found inside the fortress. Not everything, not the weapons platforms, not the technical details, but the history, the records, the story of the civilization that had built this place and why. Sorev listened. When Osi finished, Sorev was quiet for a long time. You are saying this structure belongs to your species, Sorev said. I am saying this structure was built by our ancestors to protect our home system, Osi said. That is what the records show. The recognition system in the fortress confirms it. It opened for us and for no one else in 15,000 years. Another silence. A strike force is coming, Sorev said. 60 ships. I want you to understand that I do not personally support this action. I want you to understand that when I say that, it is not a negotiating tactic. I am telling you because you need to know. I know, Osi said. We have been monitoring their transit. They will arrive in 40 days. High Counselor Vreth commands the strike force. He believes the fortress is an existential threat to the Galactic Assembly. Sorev paused. He is not irrational. The graveyard is a serious argument for his position. The graveyard, Osi said carefully, is evidence that the fortress defends itself when attacked. That is not the same as an existential threat. I know that, Sorev said. Vreth knows that too. The difference between Vreth and me is that I think the distinction matters. Osi thought about what to say next. We will not fire first, she said. I want that on record. If the strike force holds position and does not attack, nothing will happen to them. And if they do not hold position, Osi said nothing. She did not need to. The 40 days moved differently than any days Osi could remember. Webb translated. He barely stopped. He slept in the records room sometimes, curled up on the floor with his translation equipment running beside him. And Osi stopped trying to make him do otherwise, because the information he was pulling out of those walls was worth more than a few hours of proper rest could measure. He found the technical documentation on day 38, and from that point on, he and Cho worked together, one understanding the language and one understanding the engineering, each making the other faster. The crew moved through the fortress. They learned it the way you learn a ship you are going to rely on, not just the systems, the shape of it, the way sound moved through the corridors, the specific light in specific rooms, the feeling of walking through something that had been built to last and had delivered on that completely. Nair spent most of his off hours in the docking bay, running his hand along the walls. He never explained why. Nobody asked. On day 39, Cho brought all the weapon systems fully online for a test cycle. She did it carefully, one system at a time, reading the response, calibrating. The energy output was staggering even at 20% capacity. She ran it for 4 minutes and then powered back to standby and sat quietly for a while afterward. It works, she told OC. All of it? OC asked. All of it, Cho said. Every emplacement, every platform in the field, everything. 15,000 years, and everything works. She said the last part the way you say something that you cannot fully fit inside your understanding of the world. Not with awe exactly, with a kind of respect for the craft of it, for the people who had built something, and meant every word of what they built. The strike fleet arrived on day 41. 60 ships dropping out of transit at the edge of the system, moving in formation. The 6 Tharn capital vessels at the center of the formation the way the biggest stones sit at the center of a wall. Even from inside the fortress, the sensor readings were readable. OC had Cho put them on the main display and looked at the fleet for a long time. 60 ships. She thought about what she was looking at. Then she opened the communications channel. High Counselor Vreth answered personally. He was older than she had expected from Sorev's description. His face had the texture of something that had survived a great deal, and had the marks to show it. He looked at Ose with the specific expression of someone who has been told an important piece of information and is still deciding whether to believe it. Commander Ose, he said. The translation software made his voice flat but precise. You are aboard the structure. I am, she said. You should evacuate to a safe distance, he said. What we are about to do will leave nothing standing. High Counselor, Ose said. I want to show you something before you make any decisions. She nodded to Cho. Cho brought the external cameras up, full view of the debris field. Then she ran the scan overlay, the same scan she had run on day 31, highlighting everything that was not dead metal, everything that was waiting. She broadcast it to the strike fleet. On 60 ships, sensor operators and commanders and tactical officers looked at their screens and saw the graveyard reclassified in real time. Saw the debris field resolve into something that was not a debris field. Saw the weapons platforms scattered through it like seeds in soil, evenly, deliberately, in a pattern that had a word for it, and the word was kill zone. The fleet channel went very quiet. Vreth looked at his screen. He looked at it for a long time. His face did not change, but something behind his eyes did. The specific change that happens when a person who has been confident about a plan realizes the plan was built on an incomplete picture. Those platforms, he said, have been dormant for up to 10,000 years, Osi said. They came online when we arrived. They are currently in standby. Every ship currently inside the debris field is within their operational range. She paused. High Counselor, your fleet entered the graveyard to approach the fortress. I want you to understand that the moment you crossed into the debris field, you were already inside the defensive perimeter. Silence. You are telling me, Vreth said slowly, that we are already inside it, yes, that every fleet that has ever come here was inside it from the start, Osi said. Yes. Vreth was quiet for a moment that stretched. They never had a chance, he said, not a question. The fortress does not attack, Osi said. It has never attacked. Everything in the graveyard came here and chose to fight. The fortress simply made sure that choice had a permanent outcome. She kept her voice level, matter of fact, the way her ancestors had apparently written their history, without decoration, because the thing itself was enough. I am not threatening your fleet, High Counselor. I am telling you that this structure does exactly what it was built to do. It has done it without fail for 15,000 years, and it belongs to us. If your fleet holds position and does not fire, nothing will happen to anyone. That is not a negotiation. It is a description of how this works. Vreth looked at her through the screen. She looked back. She was sitting in a chair inside a 60-kilometer fortress that her ancestors had built to make precisely this argument. And she was making it quietly, and she did not raise her voice. And she did not need to. Vreth said, I need to consult with my commanders. Of course, Osi said. She closed the channel. She sat in the quiet of the fortress and waited. The strike fleet held position for 4 hours. Then High Counselor Vreth opened the channel again. He looked, if anything, slightly older than he had 4 hours ago. The assembly will require formal documentation of your historical claim, he said. Translated records, authentication, independent verification. We will provide all of that, Osi said. There will be a formal process. It will take time. We understand. Vreth looked at her. Something in his expression had shifted. The specific thing that shifts when a person stops arguing and starts accepting. Not comfortable acceptance. The kind that comes from being shown something true that changes the shape of what you thought you knew. The Kreth Empire, he said. They were the most powerful civilization in this galaxy for 2,000 years. Yes, Osi said. And they came here, yes, and they lost. Osi said nothing, the graveyard said it for her. Vreth was quiet for a moment. Who were your ancestors, Commander? It was an honest question. Not hostile. The question of someone who was genuinely trying to fit a new piece into a picture that had just become much larger. I don't fully know yet, O.C. said. We're still reading the records. But they were people who got hit hard enough and often enough that they built this instead of fighting one more war. They put everything they had left into it, and then they left it standing. She looked around at the walls of the room she was sitting in, at the faint hum of 15,000 years of patient machinery. They trusted us to grow up and find it. She thought about the signal. Transmitting for an unknown number of years, aimed at a small blue world where something was becoming what it was going to be. She thought about the recognition system, the nitrogen-oxygen air in the docking bay, the lights at the right height, the door that opened without being asked. Not a gift exactly, not a weapon exactly, something in between, a foundation. An argument made in metal and composite and 15,000 years of silence that said, we were here and we were real and we did not fall, and neither will you. The assembly will stand down, Vreth said, for now, pending the formal process. Thank you, High Counselor, Osei said. The channel closed. That evening, Osei stood at a viewport on the upper level of the fortress. The graveyard was visible from here. Hundreds of dead ships turning slowly in the dark, lit now by the fortress's running lights. The first time in who knew how long this field had been anything but cold and black. The light made the wrecks look different, less like a warning and more like a record. Evidence of something true, left in the dark for anyone honest enough to read it. Nair came and stood beside her. He had a cup of coffee. He had found, remarkably, that the water recyclers in the fortress were still functional, and had adapted them to the ship's supplies in about 4 hours, because Nair was that kind of person. He looked at the graveyard. 16 species, he said, at least, Osei said. 15,000 years. Yes, Nair drank his coffee. We were farming, he said, when they built this. Somewhere on Earth, somebody was figuring out wheat. Some of us were, Osei said. Nair was quiet for a moment. The ones who built this. The ones who left. Do you think they made it? Wherever they went. Osei had thought about this. She had thought about it a great deal in the last 41 days. She did not have an answer that was anything more than hope, dressed up as theory. I think they were the kind of people who made things that lasted 15,000 years, she said. I think people like that tend to be hard to finish off. Nair nodded. He seemed to find that sufficient. They stood there together in the light of the fortress, looking out at the old dead fleet of the galaxy's long history of trying, and at the stars beyond it, cold and countless and full of things that were still unknown. The fortress hummed quietly around them, patient, proven theirs.